Good afternoon. Namaste, everybody. So last year, in the month of March, I was at the Kumbh Mela festival on the banks of the river Ganges in Haridwar in India. Kumbh Mela is the world's largest gathering of humanity. 50 million people. And in India, when we say millions of people, we actually mean millions of people. It's not a figure of speech. And this is the first of 3 stories I want to tell you before I start my presentation. So early one morning, I was walking along the banks of the river Ganges when I saw at the festival one of the attendees. Now, this festival is the largest gathering of yogis, swamis, Hindu holy men. These are career spiritualists who have dedicated their lives to meditation, yoga, mindfulness, the inner world. So there was this yogi standing on the banks of the river, and he was not in a yoga pose. He was not meditating. He was not chanting Sanskrit mantras. Instead, he was jabbering away on the cell phone. And I was thinking, what are we doing to humanity, distracting these professional meditators with all these technology that we are building here in Silicon Valley? The second story I want to tell you is that in the month of November this past year, I had this great fortune of realizing a goal that I had written 12 years ago. On a piece of paper I wrote 12 years ago, I want to meet the Dalai Lama in person. And at that time, I didn't know where he lived, how you go about meeting him, or even why exactly I wanted to meet him. But one thing led after another, and it's a whole other story that I can share with you separately. But when you put the intention out there, it magically manifests itself. And in the month of November, this happened. I was actually in his living room, spent 45 minutes in a conversation with His Holiness. And I was struck by a few things during the conversation. The first, of course, was his presence, his gracefulness, his graciousness, his authenticity. It was so moving, I cried when the meeting was over. And it is obvious as to why he is so present and centered when he speaks to you and connects with you as a person. Because that morning when I met him at 9:30, he had already meditated on the roots of compassion for 4 hours, which is what he does every single day. Gets up at 4:30, whether he's back in Dharamsala in his house or whether he's traveling and speaking at Stanford University. And how long has he been doing it? 71 years. He's 75, now 76. And from the age of 4, when he was taken away to the Potala Palace for his training, this is what he's been doing every single day. And when you have devoted that much time to your inner work, clearly that manifests in a certain presence, a certain energy. That is obvious to all of us. But what also struck me was this man's understanding of technology and how he could put everything in a scientific, technological framework. He was very interested in using all of the technologies we are building at Google, or he's on Twitter, he's on Facebook, because he wants to use them as mediums to connect to all of humanity so that his wisdom is not locked up just in Tibet or in Dharamsala where he lives now. But he also spoke about how we should look at the human body as the ultimate technology, that our brain, our breath, our consciousness is also a technology that we have been given to work with, and optimizing that is our primary purpose. And so there was this connection between wisdom and technology. The third story I want to tell you is this May, I was in West Africa doing a project for Google, a corporate social responsibility project. I was in Ghana. And one day I was on the project site in a little school. I didn't even know where we were. And I pulled out my Google Android phone, and using Google Latitude, I was able to pinpoint exactly where I was, even though it's miles away from any sort of infrastructure. But it told me very clearly that I'm in Okanfor in the Temaserak Road. And we went to a school where we were doing a project, and during the recess time, the children in the school surrounded us. And there was this real magic moment that took place. And when I was surrounded with the kids and were playing around, I said, I need to capture this one moment. And I took, I pulled out my phone and asked my friend to take a picture. And the picture was really endearing. And since I was testing Google+, which is my product, from Africa at the time, I used the phone and Google+ to instantly share it with a select group of people back at work. I wanted my team to see what the manager is doing in Africa. And this is the picture that I took, and I found it like, real endearing, surrounded by all these kids. It was fantastic. And I was standing there thinking, here I'm in the middle, somewhere in West Africa, miles away from any sort of infrastructure. And I'm able to use this little device to capture a slice of my life, and using all of the technologies that we have put in place, able to share this magic moment with a group of people from around the world, because instantly people started responding to it and posting their comments, etc. So with all of these 3 stories, what I really want to say is that for a variety of reasons, sometimes by accident, sometimes by choice, my life meanders around all of these realms. I'm at the Kumbh Mela hanging around with these sadhus from the Himalayas, or I find myself in Dharamsala having in a meeting, a blessed meeting with His Holiness, or I'm in Ghana doing a project like this in a school. And yet my life is also interspersed so much with all of the technologies that we have and we work with, and especially so in my job at Google. And I cannot separate the two. And actually, you can integrate the two is the point that I want to make. How do you take the internet and connect it to your internet? And before I talk about how I do it in my own life, I want to take a step back and explain a little bit of the context as to how it has all come together in my life, because that should give you a framework of how, in your own life, these things might be not colliding, but actually intersecting in a much more fruitful way, whether you're a yoga teacher or you're a computer programmer, whether you're a scientist or you're a body worker. So as a result of, I grew up in India, as Laurie was mentioning, and due to personal interest and what I was surrounded by, and also some sort of a spiritual hunger at a very early age, and sometimes even to a little bit of, from my parents' side, feeling a little alarmed about it, I was drawn to a lot of wisdom practices, and I went and lived in an ashram when I was very young. I found a guru when I was very young. And these kind of traditions, all of them called out to me, and they've become part of my practice for many, many, many years since I was very young. The second thing is, but a professional calling as well as intellectual and material hunger also took me in other directions towards a professional career, getting a degree in engineering, getting 2 MBAs, and pursuing a career in what you would consider as the Vatican or the Parthenon of corporate life, which is working at McKinsey and now at Google. And we always tend to think of our life as our personal life, our professional life, our spiritual life, our social life, and these all live in different compartments. It's not quite so. I think we just have this one life. And all of these different things are like small streams that merge together in this mighty river that is an expression of our life, whether it's Zoe's life or whether it is, I forgot your name, is it Neil, gentlemen? Brian, or Brian's life, anybody in the audience. These are like many colored threads that weave together into a tapestry of a beautiful life that we create around us. So what I have done, what I've found is that it is actually quite easy to take the learnings from what you do in your yoga mat or from your meditation cushion, and you can bring it into your work life. You can be confident enough to do that. You can be authentic enough to do that. And people will receive it and accept it. Similarly, there are things I learned from business meetings at Google or McKinsey that I've been able to take back into my yoga practice and share with my yoga students and bring it all together. And that's really the essence of what I want to talk to you about, the integration of the internet to the internet, as I call it, or life equal to Google plus yoga. So there are 5 organizing principles that I want to talk about that I've absorbed from all of these practices. So these 5 organizing principles that I learned, the first one is intentionality. When you do yoga practice, and I tell my students set an intention, or when you're doing meditation or start any sort of teaching or learning, you tell your students to set an intention, and that intention sets a tone for your practice. In Sanskrit, we'd call it uddesha, or in Malayalam, my mother tongue, we call it uddesham. And what is your uddesha, what is your uddesham for this day, or for this year, or for this one practice? And you can bring the same kind of intentionality into your workplace as well. And this is a lesson that I learned when I was at business school. I went to the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania, and my first week, David Pottruck, who's an alum of the school, spoke there. David Pottruck at the time was the CEO of Charles Schwab, and he said, you will get a lot of career opportunities when you graduate, as well as for the rest of your life. Choose the one with meaning and context. When you sign up for a job, ask yourself, what is the intention by which I'm led to do this professional calling? How I'm serving the world professionally. Because if you have meaning and context, if you come from a place of heart, you will do your job in such a way that you will excel in it. That itself becomes a yoga. Of course, David Pottruck didn't say it. That is my understanding. It becomes karma yoga. So that is the first organizing principle. In whatever you choose as a professional calling, find your meaning and context. So you might say, okay, how is your meaning and context in working at Google coming? Where is it coming from? How do you integrate that into yoga or wisdom practices? Besides the fact that I teach one class a week at Google and I can bring the yoga practice to my colleagues. But there's something deeper in terms of a meaning and context. And I'll repeat a story that I shared last year that Brian may remember. My own roots go back to a tiny rice farming community in southern India, in Kerala, which some of you have, I know, visited. It's a village called Chittilanjeri. And if you do the slide, yeah, it's a small rice farming village. And my grandparents lived in Chittilanjeri. They were poor rice farmers and they were marginal farmers and they had a little bit of land where, it's what they used to raise my mother and a few sisters. And if you go to the next slide, my own parents grew up in Chittilanjeri and my dad was from a neighboring village. And they grew up without electricity. They grew up without running water. They don't have a college education. The only education that they were able to get was what the rural Indian village school could get. Although they had the UPenn or intentionality to create the circumstances so that the next generation, me and my three siblings between us now have 10 college degrees, including 2 from US Ivy League schools, even though my parents had never set foot in America. It's a humbling story. When I go back to the school now, the village school where my mother studied looks pretty much the same, except for one difference. And I look at, when I drive past the school, I look at one of these young girls and I almost tear up thinking that 60, 70 years ago, this could have been my mother. But there's one difference in that village and tens of thousands of other villages like that around the world. If you go to the next picture, students in the village school with access to computers and internet and the kind of technologies that Google and other companies are building have the same access to information as any of us have, whether we are at Stanford University or in a research lab or in our own homes in communities we live in America. So there's a leveling of the playing field that is happening as a result of the work that people in this industry are doing. And to me, that gives me my meaning and context. In an era where information is one of the most important resources a human being can have, we are putting information in the hands of all people equally, all publicly available information. So a kid here or in Costa Rica or in a village in Africa or in Siberia can go watch billions of YouTube videos. They can watch a TED Talk. They can go to the Khan Academy. They can go to Wikipedia and look up and they can see pictures of subterranean life that they may not even have imagined or have access to because they live up in the mountains in Nepal or near Lhasa. So that is where, and I set my intentionality, and now the work becomes sacred. It becomes really profound as to what I'm doing every single day. And you feel like now it is your calling. So that is my first organizing principle that I brought from the yoga mat, from my wisdom tradition. Bring intentionality, UPenn, into your job. Let's go to the second principle last. The second one is this whole principle of equality. It is very easy in your yoga practice, or if you live in a monastery, or if you're in an ashram for a couple of weeks, to relate to the principle of equality and treat everyone equally, or samyata as we'd call in Sanskrit. But it seems to conflict with the hierarchy and the top-down structure often you run into organizations. And you still want to try and bring those principles. And I'll tell you 2 different corporate examples. Before I joined Google, I was with another very large global software company, and I was in their corporate headquarters, and I was a fairly senior person in that company. And I went to meet one of the executive vice presidents of that company. I had a meeting with him. So when I went to his office, I had to go up to the floor where they all sat together. It was like the Tower of Power or the Corridor of Power. And power was decided by how close your office was next to the CEO's office. First of all, I did not have access there. Even though I worked for this company, I had a meeting with him, my badge would not work. So finally I had to get special permission. And when I just saw the seating model that they had, you walk down this corridor, like in a hotel corridor, and there are doors leading off the corridor, all of them closed, and the name tag says who's sitting, but you don't even know who's sitting behind the walls. You can't see them. And that gives status and prestige, presumably. But to me, it felt like these people have imprisoned themselves with this lack of access, and this is the model that they had. And Google is an exception, and I was struck by the level of equality when I walked into Google on my first day 5 years ago. And a person I will talk about that I'm extremely proud of who does it this way is a woman called Susan Wojcicki. And you might have heard of her name if you've read anything about Google at all. The company was founded in her garage. So Susan Wojcicki was the landlady who gave a garage to Google to get the company started when they were just two founders. And then later on, a few days later, she realized that these guys were onto something, Larry and Sergey. So she joined the company as well. So she's employee number 16 and has gone on to now becoming the senior vice president of all our ads products, which means her product portfolio generates all of the revenues for Google, upwards of $25 billion last year. So you would think that somebody who's responsible for such a large revenue for the company deserves some kind of an office, maybe with a door, maybe with a sign on it. But when I started there, I found that no, she did not have. She just had a desk. She sat in like a big hallway like this. My desk was about 10 feet away from her, so she could see her entire team and communicate directly, and completely accessible and total equality. There is no sense of power or hierarchy in this kind of a setup, and I was struck by it. So I try to practice that, and I'm reminded of that, and it's very easy to practice in the place that I work. I will admit that, and depending on where you work, it may or may not be that easy. But you can still bring the principle of equality into your workplace every single day. And any organization that you work, there are going to be chefs and janitors, and there are going to be some people like Susan with a huge portfolio. But in your own frame of mind, how you treat them in an equal basis and see a human being, a spiritual being in a human body in every single person you see in front of it can actually transform that connection and transform the relationship. And in the last speakeasy, Laurie was referring to it, where she said the quality of your life is the quality of your connections. And the quality of your connections can dramatically go up in your workplace if you have this sense of equality in how you relate to every single person. And in that sense, when you work somewhere, it's a privilege because you are going to interact with dozens and dozens of people every single day and treat each of them as a gift to practice this principle of equality. The third organizing principle I want to talk about is authenticity. Now, this one can be hard, and actually Laurie talked quite a bit about this one. How do you bring 100% of yourself and be totally present and be comfortable with who you are? And I have brought some elements of that into my workplace, and I would encourage you to do the same. But I will admit that it didn't come easy. It took 10, 15 years of working in corporations before I was comfortable doing that. And I will also admit that I have a little bit easy. I work in a company, a corporation, that does encourage self-expression, so it's made it a little bit more easier. But still, the kind of things that I've done is, I teach yoga. For 5 years, I've led the Yogalist practice for Googlers every Monday at 5:30, and I've never missed a class in 5 years. It doesn't matter what deadlines I have, what meetings I have. Now, that is my non-negotiable anchor. There is a meditation group at Google, and there are meditation rooms, and I've encouraged, along with that group, creation of meditation spaces in Google. So any time of the day or night, you can actually sit down for meditation. I often go there. Often I meet somebody in my workplace who might not even be into this practice, but seems a little jittery, a little restless. I suggested to them, I said, before we meet, why don't we go for 5 minutes and sit in the meditation room, calm ourselves down, and then start. It didn't come easy. It took a while for me to get comfortable to put that out there. But now I'm very comfortable with it. If you go to my desk, since Google encourages you to decorate your workplace and bring self-expression, above my desk hangs the 7 chakra flags from the yoga tradition. There is another set of 7 flags of yantras. The kata that the Dalai Lama put on my neck, I hung it on the office. It hangs above my desk. There is a yellow prayer shawl that says Sita Ram, Sita Ram. And these are all things that express who I am and my identity, and I'm quite comfortable with it. Half my team also comes to my yoga class. So I am the manager during the day. In the evening, I'm also the yoga teacher. And I'm comfortable with that relationship. And I brought elements of all of that into the meetings and my interactions with them. But I took small steps to see if I'm comfortable. The yoga practice, for example, it started with one person who approached me because I didn't want to be the yoga teacher at Google. But when he approached me, we did like a quiet class, and word of mouth, it spread. Now I talk about it more publicly, like on camera now. But bring your authenticity to your work, whatever that may mean, however small a step you want to take. And over a period of time, you'll get more comfortable. And I was very surprised, and you will be surprised as to how people actually receive it, respect it, and admire it. Because everyone out there also wants to be equally authentic and express themselves 100%. So, and they have the same sort of reservations that you have. And when you start doing it, they realize it is okay to be yourself and come as you are. The fourth principle that I want to talk about is just a simple principle of humanity. Again, it was something that absorbed from a yoga practice. It's easy to think of it when you are on your mat, when you're listening to your instructor. It's easy to relate to it when you're in a meditation retreat, when you're in an ashram or monastery. But that concept sometimes seems to fall by the wayside when you're in your workplace, because there are all of these other demands that seem to go on top of the very notion of relating to each other's humanity, whether it's like, profits or deadlines or getting a project done. And it sometimes, in some work situations, you and each of you might have been there, it feels oppressive. It feels like, my humanity is being crushed. And that's why people leave their jobs. And there's this fantasy that, I want to leave this job, and then I'm going to become a yoga teacher, or go stay in a monastery, or become an arborist, and then I won't have any of these problems. Not true. These things can follow you, because you still need to shift your consciousness. So from a humanity perspective, here are some of the things I started doing and practicing. The very first simple step is just acknowledging the fact that no matter what your company organization does, no matter what your work situations, that ultimately it is people who come to work, who work with you and work for you. And you have to respect and accept the humanity of that person sitting in front of you, who is trying hard to get things done, who might have contentious issues with you, who might be your mentor, but it's all other human beings. And the minute you just, I know it's a simple term, but we often forget it, but the minute you repeat that in your head 10 times, you realize that means they have all the kind of challenges and issues that any human being could have, several of which Laurie talked about this morning. They might be fearful, they might be anxious, they might have family situations, they might be in a highly elated mood today, they might be in a depression, there might be a news that they receive from their parents that they're still struggling with. And often nobody's going to tell you or talk to you about it. But when that person walks into work, they are carrying the big black bag full of all that kind of stuff, which you can't see. It's invisible, but it is there, and it is sometimes holding them back. So just pausing and receiving that fact itself is profound. Talking about it takes you 10 steps forward. So how do you talk about it? I started doing this whenever I have one-on-one meetings with my team members, or when I have my Monday team meetings. One of the first things on the agenda, it's a standing item on the agenda, is we do a check-in. We actually ask a simple question. How are you feeling? Is it a good day? Is it a bad day? Did you have a good weekend? And then we do another agenda item, which is let's share fun, interesting stories from the weekend. So we go around the table and everyone talks about something that they did. They went to a rose festival, a whitewater rafting, or I felt tired, I slept through the entire Sunday, whatever it is. I encourage people to go around the table and share it. All I'm doing is just drawing their essential humanity to the workplace and telling the team that it is safe to bring it out there and just let us know how you are today. Again, it took me a while. So one way I opened the door was, as soon as I took over my new team, I told my team members, there is no one way to run meetings, there's no one way to manage. So I am going to experiment a lot. And much like Google experiments with its products, with its technology, we can also experiment with work practices, with managing teams. So I'm going to start experimenting, and you can give me feedback, what is working, what is not. And that way there was a license for me to do it. And that way the door opened for them to see some quirky things coming up that they have not been used to. And they were comfortable telling me what worked, what did not work. So here are some things I introduced. There was a speaker who came and spoke at Google and talked of authenticity, and it talked of the power of appreciation. And these are the kind of things that self-development authors speak. You read in a bookshelf, you try to practice it, but you don't actually implement it in your workplace. I said, let's try implementing it through this method that might sound a little new agey, might sound a bit, quirky and even hippie-ish. Some people might be dismissive of it, but let's go try it. So I introduced this in a meeting and said, let's go around the table and every person, look at the person on the right and say something you appreciate about your team member. It's a simple and powerful exercise, but not something that you usually do in a corporate meeting, right? Because this is the kind of thing you do at the men's movement circle, or when you have like the ladies club meeting or something like that. Whereas when you go into work, you're supposed to be all business-like, and what is the agenda, and what are the targets for this quarter, and what is the status of the project? No, instead I spent first 2 or 3 minutes saying, let's go around the table and see what we appreciate about each other. And that people are kind of comfortable with. Then I pushed the envelope and said, let's introduce a gratitude practice into a meeting and make this a gratitude circle. So at some meetings, I ask people to go around and each person talks about something that they're grateful in their life, in their personal life, in their professional life. And all of these things, slowly, step by step, introduced, has completely transformed the energy of the meeting, because now there is this essential humanity that is allowed to float. And the final cornerstone of this was I started the flower method, okay? The flower bouquet method I introduced, and I highly, highly encourage you to try this. And this is the concept of the flower bouquet. Every Sunday, I buy a bouquet of flowers. I buy a bouquet of flowers for the person I love the most in this world. And that is me, okay? And I'm not being facetious about it, because I think in a world where we have self-loathing and self-hate, it is okay to love yourself. So I'm in the habit of buying this bouquet of flowers and bringing it either in my home or my office, because I want to enjoy it for the rest of the week. And then I started thinking, why don't I bring a second bouquet for my team members? So I walked into my first the team meeting after I decided with this bouquet of flowers and explained to them, this is for one of you from the rest of us. And the way we share it is that there are 5 principles that the team has that we all agreed on. So pick one of those principles. It's like trust is one of the principles, or appreciation is another principle. So we'll pick something like appreciation, and then everybody collectively votes saying who in the team expressed appreciation the most this week or the last few weeks. And collectively we say it is Zoe, and then Zoe gets the bouquet, and then everyone else gets to enjoy, since you're in an open office. So now I've started bringing, and I might be the only person actually in the history of a corporation who buys flowers for his team. But things like that from your life, you can bring it to your workplace and have the confidence and have the self-assurance that it'll be received well. And I was blown away by how much people actually appreciated it and how much it shifted the energy of the team. Okay? So that is the 4th principle. And through this humanity principle, it has led to other things, like I've met the family members of everyone on my team. I've actually met the parents if they're coming into town. I insist that, and I do want to have dinner with them, because all of this allows you to go past the person in the professional resume and their identity in a professional sense, to see who that real human being is, and what about them makes them tick, and what can you do to nurture that person and draw out their highest potential. Because as a leader, as a manager, for me, I feel that is my highest responsibility, my highest calling in my work setting. The 5th organizing principle is this notion of humility. Again, we think about it a lot, or in Sanskrit you would call it like dasoham, the notion of at the end of the day you are just a servant of whomever you are trying to serve. It could be another person, it could be your children, it could be your parents or your spouse, but you bring that service mentality to everything you do. Again, in a very contained, carefully cultured environment. If you're in a Zen monastery, that comes very easy. If you're at the Shivananda ashram, that's just so easy, because everyone is in that kind of zone. But can you bring that sort of an element into, again, a workplace or professional setting? It seems to collide completely against what conventional thinking is, that if you take on a humble kind of attitude, people will trample over you, you will never rise up, and you will never be successful. That is the popular belief. And I'm questioning that there is no need to be that way, because I think you can be professionally or intellectually strong, but at the same time have an element of humility, and people will actually appreciate, and you'll probably recognize more for it. And it is okay to be, being humble does not mean you're being weak and you are being pushed over, that you don't stand up for your opinions. You can still be very grounded in what you want to say, but maintain an air of humility. Again, in a place like Google, bringing it into the workplace, in some ways it is structured to make it easy. We have a hiring principle that you always hire people who are smarter than you. And the company practices it to an extreme degree. It does. And So you can imagine, extrapolate that after you hired the first, second, third, 10th person on your team, you look around the room and you realize that morning you walk in and you see these 10 people who all are smarter than you. They say, I am the least smartest person in the room. And you acknowledge that and you say, that's okay. Because you know the best ideas are going to come from around the people around you, that they are going to execute far better than you can. And all you can do is to give them some guidance, give them some resources, get out of the way and let them do their own thing and perform at their highest level and be their coach, mentor, etc. So bring that humility element and remember it every single day and be comfortable with the fact that you can practice humility in this sort of a setting and take what you learned from your inner work and bring it into in the outer world of your professional self-expression. So all of these 5 principles come together. If you go to the next slide, just to kind of recap, we're talking about these are the 5 things, and there might be 5 others that you might have learned. Okay, you don't have to follow the same set, but from your wisdom practice, from your yoga practice, from your meditation cushion, there are things that you will learn that work well with your inner life, in your inner net, that you can actually bring to the world of the internet, which is in my case, or whatever be your professional self-expression. And here I talked about intentionality, authenticity, humanity, humility, and equality. So how do you bring it all together in a holistic kind of way? And I thought about this for a while. Now, these are like principles, but I don't walk around the office thinking about, let me practice humility for the next 5 minutes. Let me try to be authentic. You just want to kind of flow through in a natural way, much like yoga is a flow, much like your meditation practice is got a natural rhythm to it. And the way I decided to do it was practicing something called the namaste principle. If you just go to the next slide. So what is the namaste principle? So when I was growing up in India, the greeting that I was taught was to bring your hands together at your heart and wish them namaste. I did not know what it meant. All I would do was, my parents would say when you meet elders or my grandmother or you meet a spiritual teacher or even a teacher at school, you say namaste in a very loving and humble way. And I have to admit, I didn't even know what it meant because it's part of your cultural tradition. It's only when I moved to America and I went to yoga classes and these Western teachers would say, namaste, it means my spirit honors your spirit. That's when I actually understood that's what it means. But I love the fact that you go around and you wish each other namaste because it's such a beautiful expression of saying, the spirit in me acknowledges the spirit in you. And you see this being done all around when you are in a place like India, or also I see in Thailand, or when you're trekking in the Himalayas, or you go to Tibet, you see this. It's a beautiful way for human beings to acknowledge and for that brief instant just be present to the other person and honor that person. I said I could practice this namaste principle at my workplace. But I don't need to do it in the way I do it in India. I don't need to, every person I see, I greet them namaste and be seen as this little nut who walks around with this strange thing and says. I said I can practice the namaste principle silently. Anytime I see a person, I'm walking to a meeting, I see the human being, and in my heart, I can wish them namaste. I don't have to say. Some people I do if they know what it is, if I've seen them in my yoga practice. But with every person, so I said, can I do it with the security guard at the door? Can I do it with the receptionist? Can I do it with the chefs who work at Google, with the masseuse, the engineer, the head of the company? It doesn't matter. Every person I see, just silently practice the namaste principle. And to bring it into even more concrete relief, I got myself, or a friend of myself, when I told her about it, said, you need this namaste stone. So she got me this heart-shaped stone. It's just got namaste on it, and it sits under my computer monitor. So it's at my desk, and I see this like 20, 25 times a day, just as a simple reminder that you can make that as a central principle of how you operate. So even as there is all of this craziness of everyday workday that swirls around me and deadlines are looming and I'm getting ready for a trip and flying to Mexico City to speak there and you're feeling stressed about it, seeing this little stone with the namaste principle written, and again bringing that as an anchor, so when I get up and walk away from my desk, I see someone, silently I wish them namaste. I find it very anchoring, and through that then branch off into practicing any of the 5 organizing principles I talked about, which is authenticity, equality, humanity, humility, and intentionality. So I want to finish up, wrap up by the lesson that I want to leave you with, or the question I want you to ponder about as you finish up today and the rest of the festival is, each one of you has a very deep and profound inner work practice. And I want to applaud you for it. And you might think, no, I don't have much. I'm not much of a yoga person. I'm not a meditator. Simply for the fact that you invested 1 week of 1 weekend and the time and the money and the energy that you spent to be here, to be surrounded by people interested in the same traditions, it means it puts you in the top 1% of the world's population with making this an important focus of your life. And every one of you is drawing wisdom every single day through these practices, because that is the gift of this practice. It's not that someone like Karina, Lori, and me alone know a few things. We know a few things. We don't know a lot. But each one of you is actually getting more and more wise. That's why we call it a wisdom practice. It's a wisdom tradition. The learning just comes from within. The challenge I want to throw out for you, the question I want to ask you with is, how do you take those lessons that you draw? Pay attention to the ones that call out to you, the 3 or the 5 organizing principles. It might be the same that I shared with you. It might be a different set, doesn't matter. How will you take those principles and bring it to your everyday life, into your personal self-expression, into your professional self-expression, what that may be? And that is really the beauty and joy of a life lived on this path. Namaste. So I'm going to change the question format a little bit, make it a little more interesting and challenging. So tell us your name. That way we can connect with who you are as a person. Or you can say, I'm so-and-so and from this place, or however you want it. And also one word, something that you learned from your own wisdom practice. Okay, 1 word, and then ask the question. Oh. This gentleman here, yeah, just your name and I'm from so-and-so, right?
My name is Mark. I live in Sebastopol.
Hi, Mark from Sebastopol.
Thank you. And I'm alcoholic. No, just kidding. So, 1 word, collaboration. Thank you. My question is, you mentioned 2 things that triggered this idea of information coming from the Eastern traditions to the West. And I was curious, because a person grew up there and came here, and you learned some things there, but then you came here and learned more about those things. So when I visited India, I was expecting a little different scene. You know, I did go to the Himalayas, where I saw what I expected, but in the cities, I didn't see that many holy people practicing, and maybe it was where I was, but how does that figure that so many of the great teachers in India were sent to the West by their Swami? And is there a cycle of energy and information and change that waves through from the East to the West, back to the East to the West? Is there some long-term cycle or pattern about information and progress of humanity?
Sure, yeah. And I'll break it up, actually my answer into 3 parts. So first of all, I'll address this thing where you say, I walked around New Delhi or Bombay. I didn't see people like very spiritual. I expected them to see. These are some myths people may have. In fact, I was speaking to another yoga teacher who said, hey, I went there and I found hardly anybody practices yoga. And I thought that was a culturally arrogant statement to make, because I want to point out that even if 1% of the 1 or 2% of the Indian population practices yoga, as in Hatha yoga, as most people think of yoga as, that immediately puts you into, with a country with a billion population, that's like 30, 40 million here, and compared to 14 million people who practice here. You'll definitely not see stores selling yoga clothing, big yoga studios, etc. Because it is so seeped into everybody's life. And if you just look around, pay a little attention, you'll see it. You get into any, let's say taxi, right on the dashboard, you'll find all of these stickers there and deities on the thing, because people bring it in the presence. You look at any stores, they're called like Saraswati Textiles and Ganesh Hotel, and everybody's name is around some yoga-based principle. It's on a Sanskrit word, because it sort of surrounds and steeps you. And people do practice it, but the practice may not be visible, external. There is no show around it, and there's definitely not $11 billion industry to support it. There are no conferences. I didn't know of any yoga conference. Something like Wanderlust, it's a more recent phenomena, but it is there in your life. And if you think of like bhakti yoga, the devotional aspect of yoga, the number of people who practice it and practice it every single day before they get out work. Like when I was growing up there, I would go to my high school, and on the way with my school friends, I would stop at like a Hindu temple and do a little worship. It was just considered very normal because they all open at 5 o'clock and the chanting starts. So it's kind of beautiful to go offer a flower or something and then go on to your class. But here now I stop at Starbucks and right? The traditions have changed. So it is there, it's all over. You may not see it. You may not see it in the way that you think of it as. The second part of the question was about all these teachers coming from there. I've often wondered about it, that if this truth is universal, it should be available to all of humanity. Why is it that I have not heard of a teacher with a wisdom-based tradition coming out of Cape Verde or Ghana or Peru or Jamaica or something like that? They should be like sprouting all over the world. And I don't have a clear answer to that, or maybe I'm not aware of other traditions and practices. The third thing is, you said there is this constant stream of going back and forth. I think that is happening increasingly so now. And it's very, very affirming to me. I think what is happening is there's a collective elevation of consciousness among humanity, saying there's more to life. And over thousands of years, different groups of populations have focused on studying different things. So in the US or Western Europe, a lot of energy has been spent studying our physical and material world, and an enormous amount of achievements have happened in that plane. They put man on the moon, and they can build these bridges that are enormous long, and they can make information flow through computers. That's because people devoted their energy. Meanwhile, there are some other civilizations. You go to Tibet or something, you may think of them as primitive in some ways by some measures that you use. But what they've done is spent 3,000 years studying an even more complex world inside, and they have that science to offer. So what is now happening is people are exchanging each other's knowledge and wisdom in a beautiful, collaborative way. For most of the time, sometimes we just want to go at each other's throat, we want to kill each other. But other than that, and I think that is happening as a phenomenon, it is beneficial and fantastic for all of humanity.
My name's Claudia, I live in Fairfax. And I'm curious about the first 3 examples that were presented.
What's your word?
Oh, my word. My word is curious.
Curious.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm curious about the first 3 examples that were presented about technology, because technology is so pervasive right now, and how you can use technology to your advantage. Like if you're in Ghana and you want to capture the moment or find out where you are, versus if you're in a group and you're not really present because you're on your cell phone. How do you work with technology and not use it but not abuse it?
Yeah, thank you, Claudia from Fairfax. And Karina and I did talk about what I should center my talk around, and I could have spent a lot of time actually on how to use technology in a spiritual manner, but we thought it might become a bit narrow, and she said, let's talk broadly about the lessons that I'm learning or how I'm integrating my life in the world of wisdom into a life in the world of technology as a practitioner of both forms. But let me talk to your thing about how do you use technology in your spiritual practice is the question, right? How can you take advantage in your daily and spiritual life without being overwhelmed by it? So in that sense, technology is like fire. You can harness it for useful purposes, or you can self-destruct yourself very quickly. So let me use something like Twitter as an example, and Lori's a great example because she tweets Tiny Buddha. And when I was in Ghana and Africa, I consume a little bit of Twitter. I'm very selective about who I follow, and as soon as I see someone is like polluting the stuff that is thrown at me, I may actually remove them from it because it's not serving me well. I don't want to be overwhelmed by information. There's only limited attention span I have. So I'm very selective, for example, in Twitter as to who I follow, because anytime, once a day when I look at it, those limited number of tweets are all meaningful and beneficial to me. And I was in African Ghana, and I was going through a day of being distressed about something. There's no problem really, it's self-created, like all these problems are. All I had to do was to shift my consciousness and the problem would go away. But until I did it, I was struggling with it, and you get angry and annoyed. And I looked at my Twitter feed, and just in the right moment, there was a 140-character tweet with wisdom and a link to a larger blog that came from Lori Deshin Tiny Buddha. And I actually showed it to so many people. I said, this is a fantastic way of using technology to do that. When I go into the meditation room, at Google, I find, because there's a lot of engineers who work there, they're constantly looking for things by which they can use technology to incorporate it. And I've seen things like they bring on their Android phone or on the iPod, there are these things that prompt you and give you the little chime, and or they bring guided meditation talks, or sometimes it's like YouTube videos. But using technology, the learning is becoming faster, and we have access to more tools. One of the things that I like to do when I'm working is listen to kirtan, the bhakti yoga practice of call response. And there are many, many singers alike. And I have YouTube playlists, and I play it if I'm at my desk and I'm working, I am using technology to stream. And usually that kirtan stream will actually suggest others, and I'm discovering more that I'd never heard of. Prior to that, there were 10 or 12 that I'd heard on a CD or a cassette tape when I first started, but now I am into the hundreds because technology is actually helping me expand my kirtan repertoire. So there are infinite ways by which you can actually bring technology and make it an integral part of your practice without being completely distracted by it. And I'll talk about the Dalai Lama. One of the things he talked about was, he said, I'm getting old and it's increasingly becoming difficult for me to travel around the world and disseminate my teachings. But just think of using technology and also jet travel, how much this one Dalai Lama has traveled. This, I think, is the 13th Dalai Lama. Well, someone correct me if I'm wrong. And the previous Dalai Lamas had never left Tibet, except one who might have gone to India. This Dalai Lama has almost never lived in Tibet, right? He lives outside Tibet, and he's so peripatetic. He's in Sydney. He's doing the Kala Chakra sermon in Washington, D.C. And clearly technology has allowed him to do it. And you're still thinking of extending it even more by saying, I want to use live broadcast through YouTube and other means by which I can actually take my teachings. People don't have necessarily to come to his temple in Dharamsala, but you could be sitting in Fairfax or Sebastopol and still participate in it.
Great, so my name's George from Portland, Oregon. My word is fun.
Okay.
And I guess my question to you is, how do you decide, or do you have any strategies that you would recommend on how you focus your attention?
Yeah, it's a very simple strategy, George from Portland, okay? Do one thing at a time. Because I've tried to do many things, it just doesn't work, it just scatters me. Because this technology is extremely good. My brain, my breath, my consciousness is very good at focusing on one task. But ask it to do 5 different things, and it completely falls apart. Of course, the larger question you're asking is, what is the one thing that I should be focusing on at any one point in time, right? And it's basically a question of establishing your priorities. And about 6 months ago, I thought about it, and I came up with 10 words. And I was telling Karina about this, and she said, you should come back and talk about it some other time. I asked myself the question, and in fact, on your drive back, as you get back, I would urge you to ask this question. And I asked myself the question, if we have 24 hours in a day, a chunk of the time is taken away by other obligations where somebody else seems to control your time, and the remaining time you have to yourself. So let's say 12 hours is consumed by other people, your job and other demands and your commute you have no control over, or very little control over. That still leaves 12 hours into your control. So what is the one thing that you need, the first thing that you need to focus on? And I came up with a list of 10 words. And I'll share, I won't go through the whole 10 because that becomes a speech by itself, but it's a way of thinking and you might be able to frame. And believe it or not, the first thing that I put on my list was sleep. I said, if I'm only 8 hours, the most important thing I could do to optimize this technology is to get a good night's sleep, 8 hours or more. Only after that I should look at everything else. Okay, I've got sleep out of the way. What is the next thing that I should focus on, the most important thing? I said nutrition, because you eat healthy, otherwise this technology will again fall apart very quickly. So let's say you spend half an hour in a day and you still got 1 hour left. What is the next most important thing you should do? And I came up with third, exercise, because that is, and it could be yoga, it could be a swim, it could go for a walk. I said, okay, I've got those 3 done. I've got half an hour left. That's all I have. What should I do with the half an hour? The most important thing I should focus on. And I came up with meditation or mindfulness, some sort of mindfulness practice. And then let's say you've got another half an hour left. What should you give to? I said, love, something to make sure I nurture my heart. And then 6 was stuff, all the things that kind of pile up in your life. If you don't do it, it becomes a crisis. 7 and I know I'm being recorded, someone at work may watch it, can't work. I said, if I don't do these 6 things and try to do anything else, you actually don't perform well. So that's one way, that is one of the strategies I employ. I'm always asking the question, if I have only a small window of time, and I want to do one thing at a time, what is the one thing that I should pick up in front of me and work on it? Okay? And the 30 of us will have 30 different answers. But it is your answer, it is your one thing, and focus on that one thing, finish it, go on to the next one thing. And the one thing I want to finish up with is thank you, namaste for coming. Thank you.